And our CBS Sports golf writer Kyle Porter is with us for a U.S. Open preview. Kyle, the U.S. Open returning to L.A. for the first time in 75 years. It's still a new venue for a major, though. Kyle, what are the course conditions there in Southern California ahead of the U.S. Open? And also, how does it compare to that course down the street, Riv?
Well, I think that's a great question, Jacqueline. It is very similar to Riviera. There's going to be some nuances and quirks that are different, but the same golf course architect, George Thomas, designed both of these golf courses. And I think what's really interesting about this golf course, Jacqueline, we were talking about this last night at dinner, is it seems to be kind of a mixture of a place like Marion on the East Coast and Philadelphia, which is very short, very quirky. But then also a mixture between that and a Chambers Bay, which is obviously on the West Coast where Jordan Spieth won back in 2015, which is very almost like looks like it's the surface of the moon, just very different. So you're going to get kind of a mixture of those two sort of layouts at LACC this week. I think it's going to bake out, brown out a little bit. It's going to get very firm. It's not going to be really high rough like we've seen at some, at a lot of U.S. Opens of yesteryear. You're not going to get the high rough and narrow fairways. You're going to get balls kind of bouncing around, running all over the place, which means approach play and kind of precision with your driver is going to be really, really important. So I think it's going to be a U.S. Open that maybe more than any in recent memory really tests every aspect of players' game, including their minds as they try to figure out their way, how to kind of plot their way around this place.
And obviously with the Masters, we talked a lot about Rory and his potential to get a Grand Slam. But for this one, Phil Mickelson could capture a career Grand Slam with the win here. He's got several T2s of the U.S. Open. But how does Phil's game fare with this course? And do you think he could maybe surprise us and be in contention come the weekend, Kyle?
Well, if he is in contention, it will surprise us. That's for sure. And would be more surprising if he contended here than even at Kiawah, where he won back in 2021, where he won the PGA Championship. There's a couple of things going on here, Jacqueline. One, he doesn't have a top 25 at a U.S. Open in 10 years. Since Marion, you see right there where he finished T2, he doesn't have a top 25 even since that U.S. Open. And while his record over the course of his career at U.S. Opens has been very good, it hasn't been very good for the last 10 years. Now, to counter that, this is actually a golf course, Jacqueline, that I kind of love for him. And the reason for that is something that I mentioned earlier. There's not, you can get yourself into trouble at Los Angeles Country Club off the tee, but you can't lose a tournament, really. You can't get into, really high rough where you all of a sudden start bringing 8, 9, maybe 10 into play. As we've seen over the course of Phil's career, he's often brought those big numbers into play. And the fairways are very wide. It's going to take a remarkable short game if and when you do miss greens. And these are all features that kind of lay out perfectly for a Phil Mickelson. Now, is Phil at 52 years old going to win the U.S. Open? I don't think so. But if it were to happen at a U.S. Open for him in these past 5 years or the next 5 years, this is kind of the place where I see it potentially happening.
Yeah, really interesting to see what Lefty's going to bring come the weekend. And we've talked a lot about guys who have won a major before. But Kyle, when it comes to any of these golfers who have never won a major, who is the golfer with the best chance to win major number one for themselves? Who do you see that being this weekend?
Yeah, it's a big group. It's Tony Finau, it's Patrick Cantlay, it's Xander Schauffele. But the guy that I'm most looking at, Jacqueline, is Viktor Hovland. You'll see him ranked number 5 here. Behind Cantlay, behind Rory, behind Rahm, behind Scotty Scheffler. As you see, there's a big group there in the top 10 that have not won, with Cantlay, Hovland, and Xander, and Max Homa, who's going to be kind of a crowd home favorite this week as he's from this area. But Viktor Hovland, for me, is he's hitting the ball as well as he's ever hit it from tee to green. I think the key for him, Jacqueline, is twofold. One, he's kind of learned, you see him winning the Memorial here, he's kind of learned how to play major championship golf. He's finished in the top 10 at each of his last 3 majors. He talked about this a little bit at Memorial, sort of implicitly, where he talked about, hey, I don't have to fire at every flag. I can play away from pins. I can make par, and that's okay. I can take my medicine on some of these holes, and that's a kind of a maturity and an attitude that you have to grow into, and he's clearly grown into it. And then I think the other thing that's more up in the air is short game. I mean, these these short game areas at the U.S. Open this year, Jacqueline, they're the tightest lies that you will see at any major championship anywhere, maybe besides Augusta National. So, will the short game that Hovland has worked so hard on, will it hold up at a championship golf course like that under pressure? You know, we saw it hold up at the Masters. He played very well there for a couple of rounds, but when you get under the gun on the weekend with the U.S. Open on the line, I think I'm curious to see, you know, the ball striking's there, the mental game is there, but can the short game hold up at LACC under pressure on the weekend? I think that's a big question for Victor Hovland this weekend.
All right, one of the other big names that is headlining the U.S. Open, of course, is Brooks Koepka. He's one of the top guys in your U.S. Open golfer rankings. Now, Brooks seems healthy. He says he likes and he thrives in chaos, Kyle. A lot of his other major wins, he has played the week before. So with taking the week off, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But how confident are you in Brooks and his game, the way that he's playing right now, to be in contention come the weekend?
Yeah, you'll see him. I have him actually at the very top of my U.S. Open rankings because he's been so good over the course of his career at U.S. Opens. He's coming off a PGA Championship. I think what you said about not playing his way into this U.S. Open is a fair assessment, or is a fair critique of him, because I think he would probably prefer to do that. There wasn't really the option this year with Live Golf not hosting an event last weekend. So I think he's a little bit hurt by that. But listen, from 2017 to 2021, he only lost to 4 guys at the U.S. Open, which is just a remarkable number. He won 2 of those. He finished T2 at another one, and then he missed a U.S. Open at Winged Foot, and then finished T4 in 2021 at Torrey Pines. So his record from 2017 to 2021 is sterling, and I'm really interested by something that he said, Jacqueline, that you mentioned on Tuesday. I was watching his press conference, and he said, listen, the reason I thrive here is because I'm able to tune out everything else, and I enjoy the chaos, because everybody else freaks out and I don't. And, you know, say what you want about sort of his attitude or his demeanor or whatever, it plays very well at major championships, at U.S. Opens. He's not technically the favorite, but I think he's the guy to beat at LACC this week at this U.S. Open.
All right, and Kyle, finally, we want to get your pick to win. Who is it going to be come Sunday?
Well, it's either going to be Brooks or the guy that I'm picking, and that is Scottie Scheffler. Scottie Scheffler is having one of the great ball striking seasons of all time. If you look at his numbers for the year, he's gaining over 3 strokes per round on fields from tee to green alone. Now, that might not mean that much to just the average golf viewer, but the thing that you need to know, Jacqueline, is that the second place guy on that list since January 1 is Patrick Cantlay, and he's gaining 2.10 strokes per round, while Scottie Scheffler is at 3.15. So over a stroke per round difference between number 1 and number 2 in the world in terms of strokes gained tee to green. And over the course of a tournament, when you're that much better than even the second place guy, it just adds up and adds up and adds up. His problem, the reason he's only won twice, now he won 2 big tournaments, Phoenix and the Players Championship, but the reason he's only won twice, Jacqueline, is he hasn't putted at all. And if he's even close to average as a putter this week, I think he's going to win the U.S. Open by 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 strokes because of how well he's hitting the golf ball at the highest level right now.
It's crazy to think if your putting is average, then you could win a major, but I guess that's what happens when you're Scottie Scheffler. All right, Kyle Porter joining us here on CBS Sports HQ for a U.S. Open preview and giving us his pick. He is taking Scottie Scheffler to win it all. And for more storylines and picks for the U.S. Open, make sure you check out the latest episode of the First Cut podcast. In that episode, Rick Gaiman is diving into all of it with Mark Immelman, Patrick McDonald, and Greg Ducharme. You can download and listen wherever you get your pods, or you can watch by scanning that QR code.